Hello guys, so today I'm going to talk about database schemes, and I'm going to demonstrate and show you what my preferred scheme is for databases. So what I aim for is for readability and almost a self-documenting style. So let's just start off by creating a new table. So oops, I should go to tables and create a new table. So when I create a table, I usually like to give it a plural name. So in this case, I'm going to create a locations table. So I also like to, I know it's a little lengthy, but it also, whenever you're reading, my naming scheme can be a little lengthy, but it works really great because you always know the data that you're working with. So in this case, I'm going to set the ID, which is an int, length 11, primary key, auto increment, and unsigned. We're going to go ahead and save this, and then so notice whatever my data entity is going to be, the actual rows will have a singular name, so it's location ID, but the table will be locations. That is, this database contains locations. Okay. And then if we add another field, we can say location underscore name. I like to separate everything with an underscore. Dashes don't work very well, and mixing cases, also like using camel case to me is less readable, so I prefer the dash. But I suppose if you were really into well, this is my preferred method. This is the way I like it. I mean, I can work with camel cases. I've seen that. I don't like it. I never use spaces either, so it would never be location name or location name, right? That doesn't work. So location name is the way I like it. Otherwise, you're forced to put quotes around stuff, and it's just more trouble than it's worth. So this way, it works in PHP really well, and it's just an easy, really easy design. So anyways, we'll use like a varchar for our name and say it's 255, and we won't allow it null. We'll add some index, so location type. We might have a type, so like different types of locations. So in this example, I'm kind of going to cover some stuff from my application, the Napa application I've been working on. So we might have another table called location types, and then we can come back to this and add a foreign key constraint, but let's just say it's an int, and we'll also make it 11, or I don't know, we're probably not going to have that many, so let's just add it to that, and we won't allow it as null. I also like to keep all my foreign keys and all my primary keys at the top, so location type, and I would add ID to it to kind of tell me that just by looking at it that it's an ID of some type, that it's either a foreign key or and it's also that it helps me understand that it's also going to be more than likely an integer. You know, that's not always the case, but often it is. So I'll get to that in just a second. So location type ID, and then so we have our location name, and then we might also add location description. Oh, never a dash, always an underscore, and we'll just leave it as text. And we can also not allow it as null. We want to have text in there. So so another thing too is if we're going to be setting some basic states, there's two ways of doing it. So say we wanted to have our location either published, unpublished, a draft. We might set those and never really change them. Like there won't. It's once we have all the types of states that we want for each entity. We're probably not going to change and add a in review or something like that. We could probably add those all to begin with. So rather than creating a whole other table that we might have to join to, let's just create a new field called location published status. And rather than creating even a foreign key, let's just make this an enum. Okay, and we can set, that way we can set some states for it, so published, and we can add unpublished, and we can add a let's see, draft status for it, and reviewed, let's see, draft, and I think probably those should be enough. So we can leave it like that for now. And these values are strings, so just keep that. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with enums already, but this would be a really good example of when to use an enum. When you know exactly the values you're going to need. So we're going to always just use draft, published, unpublished. We don't need to create another table to join just to have those. I mean, if we're going to, at the most, we'll have 5 types, but it's really, really unlikely for us to ever change that. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I mean, like I said, we could add another table with just 3 things in it, but to me that's a waste. So having an enum in this case, in this situation, is just like a really great way of doing that. So let's take a look at our table again. One other field that I'm inclined to add. So let me do design. I guess I could just go to design table. Another field that is location created, and then so this will be a date time, and leave that on. Oh, and also we'll want to set a default for our enum. So I like to set it as draft. Go ahead and click save, and then the other one is last updated. Location last updated. Okay, so another thing about this scheme, or the way I like to write out my tables too, and prefacing them with the singular version of the entity, is that it takes away the ambiguity. I'm not going to pronounce this right. Ambiguity. There we go. Ambiguity of the data when you're working with it in the code. So sometimes you might have like you're joining multiple tables and you're using ID a lot. If suppose we were joining 2 tables, locations and properties that are associated with that location, right? And they each just had a field called ID. If you were to play around with it like that, you might have to create aliases or things like that. And you know what? You might still want to create aliases, and that's fine. But this way, you always know what data you're referencing. So I really, really, really like that method. So this one would just be a timestamp. And we're gonna onUpdate set current timestamp. So I like to set a default of an empty string is fine, and don't allow null. Location last updated. Oh, can't do that. Save. There we go. There we go. It's always gonna default down to 0000 time. So sometimes we might want to add comments. And now I generally don't like to add a lot of comments because I feel like a really well-designed database scheme is self-explanatory. But if in cases where maybe the data type is, or the way you're storing the data is a little weird, or for some reason, consider using a comment then. Only if by looking at it you really just can't get it, or down the line you're not going to get it. Otherwise, I tend to avoid the comments. But they come in handy, so don't be afraid of them, but question why you're adding a comment. Let's see, did we save? Okay, so we have our indexes. And also, let's see, if you find that you're doing a lot of searches by name, so in this case we might do some searches by the location name, it's a good idea to add an index. So I like to prefix my indexes with a IDX, so I would just name it IDX, boom, location name, and then we would choose our field, location name, and we'll set a normal with a B tree. There we go. And that's a good reason to add an index. Now we'll add a foreign key in just a minute. We actually have to create the table for our types. So let's go ahead and create a types table. Let's see, new table. So we'll call it location types ID. I know it's a little lengthy, but you're never not going to know what data you're working with, and that's just a really great benefit. And another thing here too that you really need to understand or keep in mind is that when you're selecting data, you want to only select the data that you need. You don't want to select everything. So you can create aliases for this that are shorter, and you don't have to type in the entire name. But I don't mind it because I always know exactly what I'm working with, and it's just nobody has to read any comment or look at a UML design or something to figure out how things are connected or joined. It's pretty self-explanatory. I love that. So again, we'll do an int, and I think we set it this primary key, set the length to 5, allow null, auto increment, and unsigned. So we'll save this and we'll save it to location types. Again, notice and I should really call this location type ID. There we go. Alright, now we'll just add a name to it. Our varchar, and we'll set it to 255. Don't allow blank, and then we'll click save. And I think we are good to go. Let's just double check that our what we're going to create a foreign key to, the length is also a 5. Oh, and we also need to check, and I think I have it on this database, that the default storage engine is InnoDB, and it is. Got to make sure that the other one is also the same type. Options, okay. Oh wait, that's the same one. Design table, here we go. Options, yep. Okay, so now we can add our foreign key. So I would prefix it with an FK. Location type ID. Oh, foreign key. Let's go ahead and make this a little bigger. Right, set the field, set the reference data, so in our case it's the example. Let's see, where is it? Ah, there it is. And the table is locations that, and then the ID. And then, so here's another thing to note on delete. So if we're going to delete a type, do we want it also to delete the locations? We're going to say no, restrict, restrict. And on update, we're just going to go ahead and cascade it. So if we change the location type ID for some reason, then it'll just cascade, and all our data will stay nice and clean, and we won't have any records that have references to other records that no longer exist. Great way to keep your data always stable. So now we've let's see. I think it was because our type was 3. Darn it. I think I'm gonna have to. There we go. We have to delete this and start all over. Okay, now we can add our foreign key. One thing to keep in mind is that the field types have to be of the same type and length, so it needs to be an int of 5, and then we can do it. We can add the foreign key. So let's go through this process again. Location type ID. Let's find example. Where is it? There it is. Well, location types is the one we're matching. We're going to say restrict, and on update cascade. There we go. Now click save, and I can't create table. Error, no. Type ID. Oh, another thing I missed. It has to be also unsigned. There we go. Now it worked. That was the other issue we had. Not only was it the wrong size, but it also, you have to keep it unsigned, since the other one is unsigned. Okay, so now we should have our foreign keys set up. So keep in mind, when you create a foreign key, you don't want to run into problems, and so maybe create a little checklist. I have these little sticky notes all throughout my office for all the things I got to remember. I keep them. Luckily, I have a nice desk where I can keep all these sticky notes. But you have to remember these things. Otherwise, you're gonna run into those errors, and they can be a pain in the butt. I personally do not like the documentation for MySQL. I think it's poorly laid out. But it's a great database except for the documentation. Thanks a lot, Oracle. Anyways, that being said, I think we've covered most of the key things that go into database design. I mean, we could convert this. This is one of the things I personally love about Navicat, is we can reverse this to a model, and we can take a look at our UML design here. I think these are all the fields, so I have to, yeah. And we can, of course, share this with people, and let's see, we can, their model database, we have it set to MySQL, we're good. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and post this PDF online, so it should be in the blog post at the bottom somewhere for a download if you want to take a look at it. And I'll probably also export the SQL so you can, take a look at it. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's see. Let's save this model as locations underscore UML. All right. Thank you again, and I hope this helps you kind of understand what all the different steps, what I feel are the right steps, or good rules of thumb for creating and writing out your database scheme. Try to keep underscores, plural names for the table names. The entities are singular. As I already said, use dashes, and try to use foreign keys where where you're referencing another table, and then also when and how to use enums. I think it's a really, really good idea to use enums. It's really appropriate where the data isn't really where the values aren't gonna change, where you're gonna have pretty much they're constants, if you will. So you're gonna have always draft and published and unpublished. And maybe on occasion you'll add a new data type, but it's going to be very rare. You can come in and add a new enum value. Now, if the data changes, even maybe once a month, I would totally not use an enum. I would say, you know what, I'm going to create a form on my web application or whatever application I'm writing, and just add them there. And so you'll have to join to a table and create a foreign key. That's when I would do that. So I hope again that this has been helpful, and happy coding. Cheers.